and welcome back to Live, Laugh, Stuck. And last week you heard Domi playing a caricature, the username of which we have not yet decided, but it's a fun time. It was a fun time. Regardless, I'm talking kind of weird about it because we're recording this first, so we could get Domi's actual thoughts out. And my thoughts probably aren't going to change between the two. I just won't be discussing it with a caricature of a critic, but. What we're doing, which, again, you should know from last week, is we are reviewing and ranking all the classes and aspects in Homestuck, both kind of in general. Last time it was more just about the game experience. Is that the term, Dominic? What am I saying?
I guess a way of describing it would be to be like, we're trying to look at, like, the game completion efficiency of, like, the classes and aspects. Like, if some esports dude were to make a fucking tier list about these things, what would they think is good in the game, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So, but like the Game Bro stuff one was last week. This is just like the game experience.
Oh,
like
yeah,
how a normal person.
Sure, yeah.
Again, this is a weird thing because we're recording this out of order. This is mostly for my benefit because I wanted to get Domi's real thoughts about things first. Because I think it would help me. And hopefully it did. So let's get started. You wanted to do classes first. This is just in the order that they had it on here. Not any special order, except that I moved all the little dudes down. So we're starting with blood, which is really funny. Because that's kind of what started the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The original joke was, like, what if somebody just, like, what if everybody thought blood was bad, but there was this one YouTuber who was, like, a blood believer?
Yeah, and I said technically that was me because I'm kind of making blood a little OP in my Dirt Cat fic. It's called Bondless Prince, Bloodless Knight. It is on IO3. It currently has over 70,000 words. I'm going to start updating it again this month after my month off. So go check it out.
It's real good.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So, at risk of over-explaining the joke, right?
Yeah.
there's some layers to why I found the blood thing particularly funny. Because, like, I think that, yes, the wider gaming community would think blood was, like, terrible. Because I think the wider gaming community has a tendency to underrate support in general.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think that the guy that I played in the last one is overcompensating for that. So, like, me personally, I think blood lands around, like, a solid B tier.
Yeah.
It's not gonna win you the game by any means on its own, but, like, I think a good blood player will get a group of players who are on the border of being able to win the game and bring them over the edge.
Yeah. Why is that? Like, what is your conception of blood that makes this the rating?
I think that a blood player is not going to, on their own, be the sort of player that's going to, like, go out and, like, win all of the quests and beat the Black King on their own. It's just not what any blood player is really good at. I mean, and obviously all of this is class dependent as well, which is kind of another part of the gag, is that it makes no sense to evaluate blood on its own without the context of any class.
Yeah.
But, like, a blood player generally is going to be best when they have a crew of other players who are good at going out and completing quests and beating the Black King, and can organize them to do that better.
Yeah.
Blood players don't win games, but they make players who can win games win games.
I feel like we're going to have so many good, like, quips that you should turn into your Discord status. Or that, like, I need to remember to come back and, like, clip for, like, you know, social media stuff. Blood players can't win games, but they can help players that can win games win games. Is that...
Yeah. They're like a coach. That's how I view a blood player. They're like a team coach that's, like, really good at their fucking job, you know?
I was gonna ask, I don't know if you have this planned for the next episode we'll record, the episode that everyone's already listened to, Is there like a Fire Emblem character or another like kind of standard like RPG character or class that you would compare Blood to?
Sure, yeah. The type of Fire Emblem character, and thank you for indulging me in this, by the way.
This is indulgent. That's these 2 episodes.
Yeah. So I think that if you're gonna compare like a type of Fire Emblem character to the Blood player, I think it's, depending on the game you're playing, it's either gonna be the like old man paladin who is gonna be bad past a certain point in the game, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
But is around early to help you get through the early game and like feed kills to your weaker units.
Yes.
Or if you're playing the type of game that has like skills and stuff, your Blood player is gonna be Alir from Fire Emblem Engage, who has like decent combat capability on their own, but is really powerful because their personal skill makes them like a really solid support unit, right? Like a main character with a lot of great support potential.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I know that type of character. Cool. That's me. I get that reference. I know. I like I've played Fire Emblem games, but for the context of obviously Domi, I've played Fire Emblem. But I'm not as in the weeds. Whenever I get into the weeds of Fire Emblem games, it is because I'm making shipping charts to get the optimal pairings based on my preferences, and then a lot of times I'll read the epilogue dialogue about their pairing to figure out which ones have the optimal outcomes according to my preferences. That's when I get into the weeds of Fire Emblem. I don't know all this other shit. I mean, I did get pretty into the weeds of Fire Emblem Heroes. Yeah, but I mean, but I know the old guy paladin at the beginning who ends up being bad later. Old man Carcat. Cool. And I just realized, like, after I'm like, it's just in whatever order it was on here. It's alphabetical. Duh. They always go alphabetical based on the file names.
Yep.
Which is why I had to reorganize it. Anyway, so obviously up next is Breath. This is when I have a guess based on my glimpses into classpec discourse. I mean discourse in the way discourse was originally meant, which is just discussion and not like flame wars.
So where do you think it's going?
Based on my fandom impression, S tier?
I mean, yeah, like, you can't not put Breath in S tier. Now, this is gonna go in S tier with a caveat, actually. My caricature from the last one is gonna spell out a lot of the same thoughts about why I think Breath goes in S tier.
Mm-hmm. But you could just say it non-douchey.
Yeah, I'm gonna... Yeah, exactly. So, the thing about Breath is that it's really powerful, and a lot of its power in Homestuck proper comes from John's particular power set. And in the last video, we talk about that as if it's like Breath's core thing, right? Like it's the core identity for Breath in gameplay, is that, the retcon glitch exists.
Right, that's so... that's why I was never sure if this was actually like a legit thought and was unsure when I was suggesting S for Breath. Because it does feel like people say, combine John's retcon powers and, the shit he got from touching the ultimate weapon with, just Breath on its own.
Yeah. And I think that there is some amount of that is valid, right? Like, you should grant Breath
I think it definitely combined well with the way he uses the powers. I think it definitely combined well for that, but...
Absolutely. And I don't want to dig too deep into Spurb cosmology, she says, about to dig deep into Spurb cosmology.
Yeah.
But, I also think that the retcon powers themselves, even if you want to give full credit for them to John being an heir of Breath, and the weapon just kind of, amplifing his power.
Oh, unlocking.
Yeah.
Ult without going ult.
Exactly, yeah. Which is, I think, a good way of thinking about it. Even if you want to give that credit to Heir of Breath, John's retcon powers are only useful insofar as Homestuck is a story that is ruled by a Lord of Time.
Oh, yeah.
The whole reason that the retcon powers are important is that they allow John to break out of the imposed structure of the Alpha timeline that Caliborn keeps Paradox Space inside of in order to make Lord English powerful.
I need to get you on more Moosestuck episodes for risk of going too off topic with this, but we're about to start reading again, and so this will be after the Gigapause, where we're about to get John's, like, you know, using his retcon powers besides little, like, random ones he's done so far, you know, because everyone's gonna fucking die, and so they're gonna go to a different the different timeline. And so this is like a really good discussion for me to be having right now, because for one, I had not conceptualized I guess I haven't read a lot of discussions about the ultimate weapon in general, and I just connected the retcon powers to the ultimate weapon and not as a way to unlock things. Like, the ultimate weapon was the retcon powers and not like the ult without going ult. So that's interesting for me to chew on.
Which, to be clear, real quick, that's an interpretation.
Well, for sure. It's just never one I had considered. Like, that hadn't even, like, occurred to me as a possibility. And again, that's why I'm going to chew on it. And then also the retcon as breaking out of a session controlled by a Lord of Time, like you were saying. Yeah, again, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on that, because I'm sure I'm going to get into it later, but I just need to pull you on some key moments of Moosestuck, or, like, get you on, like, maybe when we're done at the end of Homestuck, to help explain stuff and discuss things.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Now back on track with Breath and how...
Right, so with all of that in mind, I think Breath being S tier is highly dependent on whether or not you are taking... Your story is taking place within the actual Homestuck cosmology. Because if your session is ruled by a different kind of lord, then your amped up breath powers might not be as useful. Because the Alpha timeline is like a construct of Lord English, specifically. It's what allows him to exist.
You are just opening up so many more avenues of thought for me that I'm obviously not going to get on a sidetracked on right now, but just, like, what would a session ruled by a different lord be like? And, like, I'm sure this is stuff that people have talked about so much, and I just haven't gotten into... Because it's scary, because people are smarter than me about this stuff, and
This is the core way that I think about how to use classpects as, like, a storytelling device, right? Whenever I'm trying to do a classpect reading of another piece of media, one of the questions I'm asking myself is there a Lord and Muse here? And if so, what aspects are they about? And what does that say about the story as a whole and the other characters within it?
I feel like if I had this thought before I started writing Bondless Prince, Bloodless Night, which is a thought I have often, that thought of, if I had thought about this before I started writing it, I might not have had, like, Caliborn and Calliope, you know, as, like, the Lord and the Muse, because it's definitely... I think it would definitely be more interesting to conceptualize it as a different Lord and Muse ruling over that, and... Okay, yeah, cool.
We'll dig a little bit more into my Lord and Muse thoughts when we get there.
Okay.
I think in the other video we're gonna skip Lord and Muse, because they're broken. But I'll give some thoughts about this them here.
Okay, yeah, you'll just go, fuck these are broken.
Yeah.
Cool. Very, very excited for something the listener has already listened to.
Doom. Doom's really interesting. Doom's a weird aspect. I also am gonna fess up that I have very particular and unique thoughts about life in Doom that are gonna color my opinion of them here. I think that on its own, with no context, Doom is like a D tier aspect.
Okay.
But that comes with the caveat that, like, if you've got a good class in combination with Doom, it, like, skyrockets in utility, right?
Gotcha.
Because, like, Doom it's all about, like, misfortune and death and destruction and, like, the act of, like, being consumed to power something else.
Yeah.
Like, Doom is the gasoline that makes your car go.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, you know, the wrong Doom class is just gonna result in you being gasoline.
Gotcha. Okay. So there are bad classes for certain aspects. It's not like there are optimal classpect pairings.
From, like, a gameplay standpoint, I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my god, we do need to do the thing Tesseract said. I say joked about, but I think he would actually, like, I know he'd actually be down. for us sitting down and doing it and just like having like I don't know the number off the top of my head, but the numerous pairings and ranking like all the class specs.
Yeah, yeah. No, I would happily sit down and have that conversation. It would take so fucking long.
You know, I love watching 8-hour those 8-hour videos. I just watched one on Metal Gear Lord by Gaming Harry. Metal Gear Lore, not Lord, by Gaming Harry. I knew like the basics of Metal Gear. It's about soldiers. It's kind of weird. It's Kojima weird. Why are all the women in their underwear a lot? And yeah, I don't know, soldiers and stuff. But I know a lot now, so I like that. I want to rewatch. The 8-hour Five Nights at Freddy's video explainer. Yeah. And I don't play Five Nights at Freddy's. I don't participate in the fandom. I wouldn't call myself a fan. So I think it would be, if you are like legitimately down for that.
I'm so down.
Hell yeah, we will carve out some time to do that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So look forward to that, listeners. I have no idea when that would be. So Doom.
Doom on its own, absent of any context, is a D tier aspect.
Okay, cool. Like, you don't want to bump it up to C because it can be good, it's just like D.
No. Doom on its own, absent of context of class, is a D tier aspect.
Okay.
Because, generally speaking, if a Doom player is on your team, you're gonna have to start dealing with the negative things that Doom brings around.
Gotcha.
Even if you have a good class for it, it's still going to be a theme of your session, and that kind of sucks, generally.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Heart.
You gotta be real niceys to me. No.
Jax, you're a heart player. I'm a heart player, sometimes. I hate to do this to you.
I know. Listen, I wasn't expecting much.
Heart is a C tier aspect. I'm not gonna be as mean to it when we do I'm gonna be meaner to it when we do our next video.
I think this is another reason why I wanted to have this beforehand, so I could have you be kind of nice to me. Before you put on the douche Sona.
Yeah. I think that, again, this is heavily class dependent. This is gonna be a caveat I'm gonna say all the fucking time, because it's actually true.
Yeah.
The value of any individual class or aspect is highly tied to what it's paired with, you know?
Yeah.
But, like, generally speaking, Heart on its own is a aspect about the soul, about the self, etc. Unless you're creative about it, the things that Heart brings to the table as a gameplay construct don't really advance the plot, so to speak.
Yeah.
They advance you as a person and perhaps the other players, depending on your class and how you use it.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, as much as I just talked about how I think people underrate support, a support bot who's just gonna give you some, like, general passive buffs here and there, or, like, you know, maybe generate some extra experience, is not gonna play as well in a game like Spurb, where enemies that are easy to kill are abundant, and reaching max level is not a difficult thing to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. I do think, for the sake of the mental health of everybody on board, having a heart player on your team is, generally speaking, a good idea.
Yeah, what do you think about it specifically on a team of 13-year-olds? Like, Spurb seems to just grab, like, you know, the whole character arc of being a teenager.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the best aspect at keeping people, like, from going off the shit, right?
Yeah.
That's what you want a blood player for, ideally.
Yeah.
Like, that's the problem, right? Is that from a gameplay perspective, the things that, and, like, you know, maybe even a little bit from the perspective of, like, what they bring to the table as, like, a group dynamic, I just think Blood is better at accomplishing all of the things that you would want a good Heart player to be able to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And the Heart player just brings with them the risk of, like, going off...
Yeah?
Going off the deep end themselves? Not in, like, a going insane way, but in a, like, I'm gonna go off and do my own thing and, like, solve the problem on my own.
Yeah.
When that's not necessarily a good idea. Whereas a blood player will inherently always try to bring everybody together to get the problem solved.
That makes sense. I realized I forgot to ask this for the other classes, which maybe you don't have an answer for those, but the same thing with that you said for blood, for like Fire Emblem character types or like RPG character types. Yeah, those for Breath, Doom, and Heart.
Breath is a dancer. It provides unique utility that no other player can. They're not necessarily going to be your hardest hitter at all times. Probably never will be. But, like, they supply an incredibly unique set of tools that nobody else can even dream of having access to.
Yeah, dancers are pretty OP. Like, you know, as evidenced in our, we're playing a game of Heroes of Light, spelled Lite, which is a TTRPG based on Fire Emblem. It's me, Domi, and Justin are playing it, and our dancer is going crazy.
Yeah. Akio is the goat of the game.
Yeah, for real.
As for Doom, I think... Okay, there's like 2 or 3 Fire Emblem games wherein you can get access to generic units, like, that are not named and don't have support access, right?
Oh.
And I think Doom is those units. The ones that don't have any real special utility, no personal skills if those are a thing that exist, no personal, like, stat growths beyond their generic bases, but, like, exist as, like, filler units that you can replace your army with should your army happen to be short. Because it's a game with permadeath.
That is so much harsher than anything else you've said about Doom to put it in D tier. Oh my god.
Okay, but the thing is, there are games in which those units are good, right? Like in Fire Emblem Fates, it's actually, if you want to have a person to use staves in your army, it's actually, like, advantageous to get your normal staff units out of their staff using classes and capture a generic staff user instead. Because, like, stats are not really important to using stats in Fates, or to using staves in Fates, and the generic units come with their weapon ranks maxed, so they can use high-level staves without having to go through the grind of raising their weapon rank. And the actually named staff units that you have, like Elise or Sakura, right, have personal skills and stat growths that are way better suited to, like, actually being able to fucking use their stats in combat.
Yeah, that's so funny. I, like, never change anything out of their story-driven classes.
Which is so valid of you.
Yeah.
I also like staff units, generally speaking. I'm a big support girly. So, like, I also generally tend not to bring my staff users out of their staff using classes, and I will choose promotion paths that give me access to more staff units, right? If my mage is about to promote and I've got an option between a class that can use staves and a class that won't, I'll often go for the class that can use staves, regardless of if the other one is actually better.
Nice. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
As for Heart, I think that Heart is like mid-game pre-promotes. I'm thinking of, like, Jax, you haven't played FE7, have you? That's the Eliwood Hector Lyn one?
No, I have not.
Okay, yeah. Trying to think of a game that you have played that'll have a better comparison point.
I mean, I've also played Heroes. So
Heroes doesn't have the type of unit that I'm trying to discuss is the problem. I've got it. You played Awakening.
Yeah.
Heart is Flavia and Basilio.
Oh, okay.
They come in the late game. They're good to go. They're probably decent, but overall, you're gonna be better off if you've brought a unit from the early game that you've trained up to their level, right? But they can fill out your army if somebody that you've chosen to build just isn't working out the way you were hoping, or if, like, again, you're playing with permadeath and people have died, and you need spots in your army to be filled by people who can, like, do the job, right?
Gotcha. So it's like catching a late game level 50 Pokemon versus a Pokemon that you were able to EV train from like level 5 up to level 50.
Exactly. That's a really good comparison point. Okay, Hope. Me personally, I'm pretty high on Hope, honestly, but that comes with the caveat that, like, it's also really slow.
Yeah.
I think Hope's like B tier, because if you're, like, gonna really go for it, if you're willing to put the time into getting the Hope player where they need to go, not just through, like, raising their Echelon level, but, like, raising their God tiers and making sure that they're, like, putting in the personal work to reach the point that they need to, your Hope player is gonna be your hardest hitter, hands down. But
I can guess what Fire Emblem type this is going to be.
it's gonna take them forever to get there, and it's probably gonna be way more work than it's worth, because you have other people who can accomplish similar goals without putting in that amount of effort. And yeah, this is your Est. This is your fucking villager that you get probably near the late game, because that's a thing that happens in some Fire Emblem games, is that, like, you get Donal in, like, fucking 6 chapters from the end of the game.
That's wild.
Yeah. But, like, if you put in the effort, they're gonna hit fucking hard.
I feel like Est is the type that most people who are aware of Fire Emblem but not super in the weeds about it are aware of this type of character.
Yeah, definitely. Because, like, fucking Fire Emblem people love talking about Ests. In particular, Fire Emblem people love talking about how Ests are really fucking fun to use, but suck so hard.
Yeah.
Like, you know, my last, the last video put Hope in the bottom tier because, like, honestly, we're not having an F tier here. I might have you put an F tier on the other video specifically for us to put Hope in.
See, that's why I like having F tier. It's like, I feel like D is when you're like, okay, yeah, you know what? I don't like this. It's not the worst thing ever. But, like, I need an F tier for the really bad shit.
The thing is, I don't personally feel like even if we put an F tier on this list, that I would put any class or aspect in it.
A symbolic F tier. An F tier to show, look, nothing's F tier.
Sure, put it there if you want.
Nah, it's fine. We already started.
But yeah, Hope's good. I think Hope's good, because, as I mentioned, Spurb is a game where experience is not hard to come by, unlike Fire Emblem, where it's a very limited resource. But, like, it's still gonna take time, and you're gonna have to suffer through an early game where your player is, like, pretty useless. So, like, your mileage may vary. Make sure when you're doing team composition that you can support the Hope player.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You want a Hope player on a team with people who are, like, good in the early game but are gonna fall off late, so that you want a Hope player if you think you're gonna have trouble getting over the final Black King fight, right?
Yeah. Cool.
Now, Life. I think Life is A tier. This is both because it has the potential to revive the dead, which is invaluable.
Pretty
right?
pretty good. That's a pretty good ability to have.
But also, not only is it going to be a pretty kick-ass healer, it's also going to buff the rest of your team in a way that is, like, going to be very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I think of Life as a very clean opposite to Doom, in the sense that, like, if Doom's the food or the fuel, right, Life is the engine that it's running. And that is something that you need to bear in mind, because a Life player does sort of inherently come with the idea that it's gonna need some amount of feeding, right?
Mm-hmm.
In order to keep it going. You know, like, Jane didn't get what she needed, and we saw how that turned out.
Yeah.
But overall, if you're able to put in the amount of effort to keeping your Life player going the way they need to be, it's gonna be an addition to your team that you can't live without.
So, about the two things about this. One, about the feeding thing, I just love that because Mina, you know, as a thief, just, like, took everything she needed for her shit.
True.
For the second, is the revival class dependent, or do you think Mina could theoretically revive people and just would?
I think that it is pretty class dependent. I think that Mina, like, you mentioned how she doesn't have the needs that Life has because she can just take them. right? She's not
Yeah.
a needy life player. But I think
She also did kill herself and all of her friends, so.
yeah, exactly. But the consequence of that is that she doesn't also reach the same highs that other life players can.
Yeah.
Like, Mina's a very effective combatant, right? And her class has a ton to do with that. But she isn't a support player. Life is a support aspect, but Thief is not a support class. And honestly, your class has a lot more to dictate about your playstyle than your aspect does.
That makes sense.
Despite the way that I've been talking this entire time.
Yeah, I mean, I also did kind of add that on. Well, I mean, you start out with support, but I did ask what kind of Fire Emblem class it would be. It's because when we get to, like, the other ones, they're more based on actual class. I mean,
Yeah.
We'll get to it. Okay, because it, obviously it makes sense for, like, a maid to be able to revive people. I think it is interesting that a witch was able to.
Yeah, I mean, that's also a thing. Like, you're right. It is theoretically possible that Mina could revive someone. I don't see that as being thematically appropriate for a Thief of Life.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. I just thought about that. I'm like, yeah, because the maid makes sense. The witch maybe was just more like plot contrivance for Homestuck, but also witches.
Which is a thing, right? Like, plot contrivance does guide a lot of what these things can do.
But, we can get into witch when we get into witch. But, cool. Did we say what Fire Emblem type?
Oh, no, but it's your early game heal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They're just gonna sit and they're gonna use staves for most of the game, and even when they get their hands on a weapon, they're probably not gonna be your most effective combatant all the time, but, like, they'll be pretty decent because you've spent a solid chunk of the early game probably trying to pump levels into them. Or, honestly, depending on your playstyle and what you're trying to do, probably not even trying to pump levels into them. Just trying to raise their fucking staff rank is gonna get them a lot of experience anyway.
Yeah. Light.
Light is... Oh, goodness, where do I even think Light goes? Okay, I think Light's A tier. And I don't think that that's because Light reaches any particularly intense heights. I think Light gets to go in A tier because, if I'm being honest, Light players are just good, consistent, solid contributors. It really depends on what kind of definition of Light you're going for here, because, like,
Yeah.
Rose and Vriska have very different thoughts about Light, and it kind of encompasses both of them.
Do you think that's just, like, class dependent? They play differently because they're different classes?
It super is.
Yeah.
I think that Light players have the tendency to be a little selfish in the way that Heart players can be at times.
It's so funny because if I just sat down and class-spected myself and not done the class quiz the aspect quiz that came out, I probably would have given myself the light aspect. And you're like, like Heart.
Yeah.
But no, it is interesting that I get what you're saying. Yeah. It's just, I don't know, it's funny.
Your Light player is the one that's most often likely to go out and, like, start wrecking shit on their own because they think that they've got it and the rest of the group is moving too slow. But they are also gonna very keenly be aware of what needs done next and keep the group moving forward to the next big milestone.
Yeah, that makes sense.
A Blood and a Light player working together will do more for getting your session through to the end than any other combination of people.
First cat real, I guess.
Yeah. Nah, if they worked together, the trolls would have been done 3 days sooner.
Yeah. Again, I have to just push this back to shipping at all times. This is where I look at stuff. Fire Emblem character type.
Oh, goodness. Okay, this is gonna be a wild one.
Okay.
It's not the main lord, but it's the main lord's unique weapons.
Oh.
The rapier stand-in and the legendary weapon that the lord gets for free late in the game. The main lord themselves doesn't quite have because Fire Emblem is too Power of Friendshipy for the main lord to be like, I'm gonna go do it on my own.
Yeah.
But, like, the weapons that the main lord receives to make sure that they can, like, even if they're kind of poor at combat, contribute no matter what, that's what Light is.
Cool.
Mind is gonna go in trying to decide if it's B or A.
Mm.
It's like on the border between those two tiers. I'm gonna let it go to A.
Okay.
But I want that noted with the caveat that it is on the border in a way.
Okay.
I'm gonna be really mean to Mind in the other video.
Okay.
I think that Mind is like... It's another one of these circumstances where it has support capabilities that are, like, not flashy.
Mm-hmm.
A Mind player is even more than your Blood player gonna be focused on keeping the team stable. A Mind player can serve as a discount Blood player in the absence of one, and it accomplishes all of the same strengths of what a good Heart player can bring to the team without a lot of the negatives that Heart can bring to the table. If you're not gonna play with a Blood player for whatever reason, you want a Mind player for sure. And if I'm being quite honest, you probably would pick a Mind player before you pick a Blood player, because they bring additional benefits to the table that a Blood player might not. They're also going to probably be a better overall combatant than a Blood player, but that's kind of dependent on class.
Gotcha.
I do not have a solid idea of what this looks like in a Fire Emblem circumstance.
Okay. That's fine. It doesn't always fit.
Yeah. If I had to pick, I'd say, like, your early game Cavaliers, right?
Yeah.
They're, like, never gonna be the coolest people that you use, but, like, they will get the job done for the entire game if you bring them with you.
Gotcha. Cool.
I think for Rage, I'm gonna put Rage in S tier, alright?
Okay.
And it's because Rage breaks the rules. That's its entire shtick. Hope and Rage are about, like, story investment and, like, the rules and structure of your story in a very weird way, right? Like, Hope isn't an aspect that is about rules, but it is an aspect that is about engaging with the rules of the world in which you live.
Okay.
In the sense that Hope players think they understand how the world works and will impose their understanding of how the world works onto the world outside of them.
Yeah.
Rage players understand how the world works and they don't give a shit. They're gonna fuck around doing their own thing a lot of the time, but because Rage players are allowed to break the rules in very particular ways that nobody else is, Rage players will accomplish things that fucking nobody else can. Just randomly, without question, and you probably won't even understand, like, why or how or what they even did and how it led you to win the game. But it will.
Interesting. That's neat.
There's no way
no.
I can even fit this into Fire Emblem. It's just not that kind of game.
Rage is the mods, is the ROM hacks.
Yeah, for sure. Space
Getting to the two big uns.
Okay, here's the thing about Space.
Yeah? Did I?
No. You didn't cause me to say that.
Yeah.
Space is required. You can't win the game without it.
Yeah.
And in that sense, you could say Space is S tier, right?
Yeah.
But you could argue about how much credit Space should get. Hold on, I'm just gonna start repeating myself from the last video. And I think that a lot of the thoughts I'm gonna give about Space in the last video are gonna sort of carry over here.
Yeah.
I think that this is one circumstance in which I think that the simple discussion of what Space does for a group is interesting enough that I don't have to, like, have some weird bit about what my character thinks Space is like.
Yeah.
I think if I personally am gonna rank it, I'm gonna put it in, like, B tier. You do need it to win the game, and I think it does get some of the credit for literally being able to win.
Going back to the Lord and the Muse thing, is it needed to win the game because, like, in Homestuck, there's a Muse of Space, or just in general, you think no matter the Lord and the Muse, you will need a Space player?
That's a crazy question. I had never even considered that possibility before. I mean, Space players generate the Frog Planet, without which you cannot create the Genesis Frog. That's a thing which is never explicitly tied to Calliope. I think that from, like, a story structure standpoint, right, Homestuck is structured that way because Calliope exists. Now
Yeah.
that's fucking me reading what is presented to me in the comic and not what I think Andrew Hussey intended, right?
Yeah. That's yeah. But like as far as just like taking out how necessary it is to win the game because of frogs.
Yeah.
Just like if you just like had like just the powers alone, if there was some other way to do the frog stuff, to space powers be?
Yeah. I think am I being too mean to it? I think it's actually going to go in A because I think space powers are generally pretty strong, right? Now, I know that we haven't really seen them without Beck involved.
Yeah. Well, cuz we did see it, but no we didn't. I'm trying to think of a Cascade.
Nah, that was Beck.
That was Beck. Yeah, we haven't seen because the was a space player. I'm trying to think of other space players that did things because it's Kanaya and Porum, and they did not God tier
Yeah.
or yeah. Okay.
It's also hard to it's also hard to really say because I think Witch is a very powerful class in combination with Space because
Yeah.
Witch is a class about altering the world around you, and Space is an aspect about the world around you.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. Jade was just. I mean, it's discussed that Jade was so OP she had to be like nuked from the narrative multiple times.
Yeah, yeah.
And, because it's the Beck stuff, it's the space stuff, it's the witch stuff, it's the combination of all the things, because Beck was able to do stuff with the world around him.
I think I'm gonna bring Space back down to B, because I think
Okay.
that Jade's power is specifically because of her unique combination of things. I think she's more than the sum of her parts.
Yeah.
And I think that Space on its own, with its, is paternal gender neutral, or is it males?
It's male, because there's paternal and maternal.
Is there a gender neutral version?
I don't think so.
Alright. I think
Parental?
I think because Space has, parental vibes generally, and, because it's about creation and it's about the world that surrounds you. It has good stuff. It is a solid role player, but it's not gonna majorly advance your game in the same way that a lot of the ones that I've put in A tier do.
Okay.
And again, once we ignore the frog stuff,
Yeah.
just the specifics that Space brings to the table on its own without any of the game-winning necessities, it's just not that. It can be in combination with stuff, but Space generically is it's fine.
Okay, interesting.
Time
was not anticipating that.
Yeah, fair. Really, I'm curious. I mean, if what would you have thought I would have said about Space?
Well, I don't know, you saying stuff specifically. I think is different, but just fandom perception of Space is that it is an OP class. From what I'm aware of, again, I'm not in. I've gotten more into these discussions lately, but I have not been in these discussions, for the time I've been in fandom. So I did expect it to be higher up. I don't know. I think I was expecting an S tier or an easy A tier.
Maybe I need to defend this point a little more. Because I think you're right that there is a general perception that it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And I think that if you if you ignore Jade, because Jade's an outlier.
Yeah, Spider Scourge.
Yeah, exactly. You look at the other Space players available to you, and we've got Calliope, we've got Kanaya, and we've got Porum. And Kanaya and Porum, they've got very personal journeys.
Yeah.
That have a lot to do with their title, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, Kanaya's goal of, keeping her race alive doesn't have any gameplay bearing.
No.
And though she accomplishes it, and she accomplishes it well, I can't say that Kanaya did much for her group in terms of completing the game. I think that she did do a lot in terms of keeping her group functioning outside of the game, but I think a lot of that also had to do with her being a sylph.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Porum I'm not well studied on, and I'm not gonna try to make super huge arguments about, except to say that, the Dancestors lost.
Yeah, they did.
So it's hard to say what makes a successful group based on what the Dancestors do.
Yeah. I mean, the Dance Sisters are so very little in the comic outside of, like, a few of them that it's hard to say anything about it. The
Yeah.
Dance Sisters, and then, like, yeah, I don't know. Dance Sister, I said what I said. I'm not going to get into my whole thing because that's going to go into more stuff than just the classes and the aspects. But the Dance Sisters almost complicate things more and muddy the waters more than they clear things up.
Yeah, yeah. As for Calliope, she's very powerful, but she's also a muse.
Yeah.
She also spends the vast majority of the comic doing nothing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a core point that she discusses of what she understands the idea of space to be.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you do nothing for vast periods of time, and then you, I don't know, maybe do something important, right?
Yeah.
I think space, when you think of it that way, is a lot like Rage, but without the guarantees of, like, huge sweeping change that Rage can potentially do.
Okay.
I think Calliope was only able to do what she did, Alt Calliope in particular, because she was a muse, and I think Jade was only able to do what she did because she was a witch. I think, here's a better way of putting it. I think space is an intensifier for your class.
Okay.
It doesn't itself bring to the table a whole fuck ton of capabilities on its own. But when combined with the right class, it can really skyrocket you in terms of how useful you are. When you're building your team composition, you want to make sure that your space player is utilizing the best class that nobody else is using.
Gotcha.
But space itself is only there because it's required to win the game.
Do you have a Fire Emblem alike?
Fire Emblem doesn't have the same kind of, like, resource management in terms of classes that, like, Spurb has.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's difficult to port that over in a parallel. You could argue that space is like your lord in a game where your lord is especially bad. Yeah, I guess if light is the lord's weaponry, space is the lord themselves.
What about time?
Okay. Time is an easy S tier, and I feel like if I didn't put it there, I would be lying to myself and everyone else.
Yeah.
And I feel like I would get yelled at if I didn't put time in S tier.
I mean, you don't think you're gonna get yelled at for...
I do think I won't get yelled at for putting space in B tier. I feel very strongly about this.
Okay, yeah, go off on time.
Time is really fucking good. Obviously, it fixes every mistake you could possibly make. And I think I'm gonna be mean to time in the other video, and I'm not gonna say any more about it because you probably remember.
Yeah, it's a surprise for me, and y'all already know.
Yeah. I mean, time's just uncategorically good. You make a mistake, time fixes it. It keeps you moving forward towards winning the game. It has, in the same way that other S tier aspects bring unique utility that nobody else can get, time just wins games in a way that no other aspect can. I think that if space is a hard requirement, but, like, kind of mid on its own, time is a soft requirement in the sense that you're going to have a very hard time winning without it. But, like,
yeah,
you don't have to bring it, strictly speaking.
Yeah, because especially, I mean, because timeline management is a big responsibility in Homestuck, and I don't think that's just because it's a Lord of Time.
Yeah.
Over the session, it's just like that's just. I think a Lord of Time is especially OP because of how Esperb is set up, and not the other way around.
Yes, you're correct. I think that time is like Spurb is just a hard fucking game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's an annoying game, but it is hard, and it has a lot of opportunities for shit to go fucky in, like, severely unexpected ways, right?
Yeah.
And having a time player that can bring foreknowledge of how things are gonna go badly, and, like, fix it when somebody fucks up in a way that they didn't anticipate would fuck things up, it's just invaluable. It's irreplaceable. You would have to construct an entire team around, I don't have a time player, and I know I'm not going to have a time player going into this, so this entire team is constructed to recreate a single time player in the aggregate, right?
This is like a Nuzlocke challenge or another, like, type of challenge you would put on yourself to play a game. Like, this is needlessly hard, and I'm doing it that way on purpose.
Exactly. And that's why in the other video I'm gonna be mean on time, is because kind of the video, like, structurally, in order for the video to make sense, I have to assume that Spurb is a game that you can replay, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like...
when you can just press new game, time player becomes less of a necessity.
That makes sense. I look forward to it, and yeah, we keep mentioning that we're doing this out of order, and that's just part of this video.
Yeah.
Or, podcast episode audio, more people listen to it, but whichever way, part of this experience.
Void's going in C tier.
Okay, so for time, Fire Emblem.
Oh yes.
Lord in a good game.
Not Lord in a good game, but Lord in a game in which Lord is good.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Bad Lord, good Lord.
Yeah. Time is like...
Give me some examples of bad lords and good lords. I haven't played enough to know.
Okay, fair enough. Bad lords is, Roy in Fire Emblem 6, Marth.
Is he kind of, like, iconic? Roy and Marth?
He's iconic because everyone likes Roy from Smash. But yeah, Roy in his game actually sucks ass.
Oh, okay. I thought he was in Smash because people liked him, but okay.
He was in Smash before the game that he was in came out. He was in Smash as a promotional thing for his game.
That's funny. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Okay, that makes sense then. And then Marth I get because Marth's the first, right?
Marth is the first lord.
The first one gets to be bad. First gets to be bad and iconic.
Okay. If any Fire Emblem people who actually understand the dynamics of every Fire Emblem game are listening to this, which is a low chance but possible, they're gonna yell at me for calling Marth bad. Because Marth is... I have to be sure to state that I know this. Marth is really good in actual Fire Emblem 1.
Okay.
But in any remakes of that game, and in any future games he shows up in, maybe not FE3, I actually don't know that much about it, but Marth really sucks in any other context.
Oh.
Yeah. It has to do with some specific aspects of, like, the choices that they made when remaking those games and etc., right? Like, Fire Emblem 1 doesn't have the same difficulty options that that its remake does. And the limitations that Marth has don't put him in as many downsides as the remake does. They also just nerfed him in the remake.
Does this include Lucina Marth?
This does not include Lucina Marth.
Transmasks win again.
Lucina's just good.
I love Lucina.
Good lords are people like Chrom and Lucina and Corrin and pretty much any recent Fire Emblem lord.
Is it... Power creep isn't a thing that makes sense like it does in Pokemon, where it's like the recent ones are powerful because power creep.
Lords have been power crept, though.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, actually. It's not... I think that the reasons behind it are different from the reasons that, like, power creep occurs elsewhere.
Yeah.
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that Lords started being avatar units.
Oh, okay, yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, as soon as Lords become self-inserts, they automatically become better.
Yeah, sorry, I'm watching a video off and on about what a Mary Sue is, and so it's just the self-insert and like, fucking Mary Sue.
Literally. Corrin is literally that.
That's so funny. I'm not sure the person who made the Mary Sue video I'm watching would agree with you, but it is funny. I'm glad that you said these though, because I didn't get into Fire Emblem until Awakening came out.
Sure, yeah.
And so it's like, haha, Chrom, my boy, and Lucina.
Yeah. In a lot of games before Lords started becoming self-inserts, they tended to actually be... The games tended to be designed around your Lords being game loss conditions. Like, if your Lord dies, you lose the game, no matter what.
Yeah.
And so Lords in earlier games tend to be... That's maybe wrong. In the really early games, Lords are good, because the designer of the really early games understood that if it was easy for you to lose your game loss condition, that could be frustrating.
Yeah.
So those Lords were pretty solid overall, and there are some where the Lords are the best units in the game. Then in the middle of the series, they started, like, playing around with making lords kind of shit. And that kind of led to lords just being like, okay, well, I guess I gotta have this unit on the map, but I'm not gonna use them. That happened for a little bit, and then they started getting a little bit better in Tellius, and then, like, lords started being self-inserts, and they were just like, fuck it, lords are good again.
Okay, nice. Now I just have a bunch of Fire Emblem questions, but we gotta get back on track.
Yeah. I will end this tangent about lord design by saying that I think my favorite lord design ever has to be Alear from Engage. I think they did a really solid job of making Alear feel strong, but in ways that it's like, you want to be actively using and leveling Alear, but Alear is never going to be the best unit in your army, and you do have to be careful not to get them killed.
Fire Emblem Engage stand, Domi takes the field.
Yeah, here's where I have to admit that I just love Engage. Okay, Void.
Yeah.
Void is going in C tier.
Cool.
It is...
Dirk and Roxy together again.
Yeah. It is a lot like Heart in the sense that, like, it has some... It doesn't really bring anything to the table that you can't get with any higher tiered aspect, and it's just... Like, no Void player has made huge contributions to completing their game, and I am unfortunately including Roxy in that. Because, again, the biggest thing that she did was create a Matriorb for Kanaya, who, again, this whole side plot has nothing to do with game completion.
Yeah, it's true. Necessary for the characters, not for Spurb. Yeah, which I think that's good, because I have some thoughts about how wild Roxy's power as a Void of Rogue is, and I'm glad that she didn't do anything more major with that with that specific type of power of the absence of nothing besides make the Matriorb, because it can go to some logic that, I don't know, it's just wild.
For sure. I was just gonna say, as a general overview thing, I want to take a quick note of the tier list as it currently stands. I've got 3 aspects in S tier, 3 in A, 3 in B, 2 in C, and only 1 in D.
Oh, we should probably say them because there's audio.
Fair enough.
So S is, and we'll go over this at the very end as well. We'll go over everything. Mm-hmm. S is breath, rage, and time. A is life, light, and mind. B is blood, hope, and space. C is heart and void. And D is doom.
I wanted to take note of the quick, like, shape of the tier list, just because I wanted to state, I don't think there are any aspects that are explicitly bad to have around.
That's why we don't have an F tier.
Exactly. I think the C and D tier aspects are highly reliant on class, and can be pretty good if you know what you're doing with them. Mm-hmm. You have to have a highly specialized player in order to play one of these aspects well. I think that the higher tier aspects are easier to just generally pick up and do shit with.
Cool. Okay. What I was going to say is you're going to have to help me with these guys down here.
Totally.
Because I am bad at telling what they are on site. I mean, obviously they're also in alphabetical order, but God forbid I'm going to know the alphabet.
Yeah, completely fair. The first one is Bard.
Yeah, the first one's Bard. Bard's one of the obvious ones.
Okay. I'm going to put Bard in C tier. And I think people are going to disagree with me about this, and that's fine.
Okay.
Bard's really strong.
Mm-hmm.
Bard's really strong in a similar way to how Rage is really strong. And the fact that Gamzee is the way that Gamzee is like, because of Gamzee's explicit combination of aspects. If we were, when we do our larger thing, Bard of Rage is going to go really high.
Okay.
But the reason that Bard is on C tier is because it's just very unpredictable.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
In terms of completing the game, you want classes and aspects that can reliably contribute to moving the game forward.
Mm-hmm.
Or have such intense and sudden contributions that it advances the game majorly in ways that you might not have necessarily been able to plan for. Bard can do that, but it can also be a huge detriment at times. You never know what your Bard is going to be doing, and it's like, a Blood player can kind of plan around what Rage is going to be up to. A Blood player cannot plan around what Bard is going to be doing.
Which we did see. That was very good.
Yeah.
I mean, because, like, when there was the summary of, like, the wrap-up of how the last fight went before everything went to shit for unrelated reasons, it was very much like Gamzee seemed to be doing fucking nothing, and then he was doing fucking everything.
Yeah.
Also, real quick, I think we forgot to talk about Void as far as Fire Emblem.
Ah, yes.
If you don't have anything, we can just cut this out.
First recruitable soldier. Moving on.
Okay. What's this one? I don't know.
That's
What
an
is that?
heir.
An heir. Okay, I'm like, is there nothing between? Because I thought that was an heir, but I'm like, is there nothing between B and H? Cool.
Nah, not really. Heir is... I'm pretty high on heir. I think heir is really good.
Okay.
But I also think that I'm overly high on heir
Because you're an heir.
because I'm an heir. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that if I'm being reasonable, heir is B tier. Heir is gonna bumble their way through the game and accidentally cause good things to happen constantly, right?
Okay.
The problem with this is that they do not have active control over it most of the time, and it's gonna be until late game when they get their active control over it, and it's gonna be based on, like, you know, finicky personal growth and not based on, like, game progression.
Yeah. I just want to say, for those who are only listening and not watching, some of these, like, because they're using just, someone made up sprites that, blank faces and everything that just have the outfits in, like, gray, green, and red, and just very, like, neutral stuff. I assume that the person didn't hear, threw them all in here, and Tier Maker just cropped them weird, or if they just, like, wherever they got it from, they just cropped it weird from wherever they got it from, or what. But it's like part of Air's face is cut off. There's one coming up that's just a zoom in on the upper body. I mean, the head's also in there, but it's more like a bust than like the full. I don't know. It's bugging me a little bit, and I
That's
think it's
fair.
just Tier Maker's cropping plus some like at least one of these being a different file size. But anyway, that's just been an issue that I wanted to point out for people who aren't watching.
It's a little weird.
This is Knight.
Yeah. Knight is A tier. Knight's a fucking solid role player. If you're gonna think about actually, this is really funny. Knight's Fire Emblem parallel is Knight. Like Armor Knight.
Did you want to do a Fire Emblem parallel for the others? I wasn't sure if we should.
Yeah.
Since theirs are like just classes.
If I have thoughts on them, I will state them.
Okay.
But it'll be harder for classes, I think. But yeah, no, they're like a party tank, right? Which might be an interesting way of looking at them from how we see them in comic. But like, my general thought process here is that they're just gonna, like, as I've said before, the thing that makes a good solid A tier on this list is just consistent contribution, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Knight is that's Knight's entire class identity. Is that they're gonna sit down, they're gonna get shit done, and that's just how it's gonna be. And they probably are not gonna want to take the credit for it afterwards. But I'm giving them the credit for it. Because fuck you.
Cool.
Next up is Lord.
Okay.
Lord's gonna go in S tier. Because obviously.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about Lord and Muse is that you can only access them in very specific circumstances. Can we go ahead and put Muse in S tier as well, actually? I'm just going to talk about them
That's
together.
a zoomed up one?
Yeah. They're the master classes. They're fucking bullshit powerful. Regardless of what aspect you pair them with, they're gonna have immense contributions towards finishing the game. But you only get access to them in the very unique circumstances of 1 or 2 player sessions. And that's a limitation. They're more like an alternate game mode than they are like classes, you know?
Yes. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Sorry, I was moving around. I didn't want to talk over squeaky chair.
Nah, you're good. Now, if you can somehow do some fuckery to get a Lord and a Muse to break out of their session and get into yours and help you, then you're fucking golden. You're so happy. You're living life on easy mode, right?
Calliope if she had a transportalizer.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think that's Thief.
No, it can't be Thief. This is alphabetical.
Thief. It is alphabetical. Hold
So
on.
we have Paige.
Okay, that's Maid, and then
Maid.
No, that's that one's Maid, and then that one's Page. That one's Prince, Rogue, Seer.
What are we
It's
missing?
Mage.
Mage, Maid, and Mage. We should have known.
Okay. I like mages a lot, like a lot, like a lot. Mage is D tier.
Damn. This is great because I think I had Felix, my baby boy, my precious OC that I will carry with me forever as like a mage of breath, and so it's just
really
like the
good.
opposite ends of the spectrum.
I'm sorry, Solix, but
Oh yeah.
you kind of suck.
I didn't even register that as first. I was too Felix pilled. Damn.
So the problem with mages is that they have all of the same benefits as seers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But mages are cosmically doomed to never be listened to.
Oh, for real? That
might
Cassandra?
be. Yeah, that might be partially my interpretation of mages, right? But like, as the active counterpart to seers, their knowledge can only benefit themselves, right? Or at least their knowledge primarily benefits themselves. And as a result, your mage is gonna usually be fucking off on their own, and or hanging out in a cave having visions, and like, it's just not.
I don't know, man. Don't you want one of those on your team for like funsies? I would love to have a guy on my team who just hung out in a cave with visions. That sounds great. I'll have him around.
I agree that having a mage who's like of like a goofy aspect around is great.
What is a goofy aspect in for the mage? Example.
Let's do Void, right?
Yeah.
A mage who just constantly sees things that don't exist, right?
That's just a guy tripping. That's just someone who took shrooms. I can have that. I can have that anytime. Well, not anytime I want, but like I can find one of those.
Yeah.
That's great. I want your justification for mage not being able to contribute to the party, and like I understand the whole like because there's the binary of like for the self and for others that people put on stuff, but that would make half the classes useless.
Okay, but not necessarily, right? Because classes that benefit themselves, when they're able to
like buff themselves for like if they're more active and like
if it essentially, I'm viewing this as like active classes are like tanks and like DPS, and they're the ones that can go out and like get goals met, and passive classes play the support to that.
Okay.
They organize the team, and they organize the team, and they further buff the active classes, and I think that a team of passive players can accomplish the game together, but they're gonna have a harder time of it without an active player to go out and get some shit done. Okay. And again, I'm talking generally. I know that active passive don't literally mean active and passive in that way, right?
Yeah.
But you want a solid mix. And the problem with mages is that like knowledge powers have their strength as a support class, because you're going to be good at because having the appropriate knowledge of what's coming at you allows you to better plan and organize your teammates. Seer is better at taking advantage of knowing shit than mages. Mages can take their knowledge and they can go off and they can like advance their own plans, and they can like, a good mage might be able to go off and be like, hey, this obscure side thing, I managed to complete that. Here's some, like, power-ups that I found. But, like, okay, this is crazy, because I don't play MOBAs, right? But maybe a good mage is like a jungler, right?
A jungler?
So in MOBAs, like Smite and League of Legends and stuff, you've got your 3 main lanes that you're trying to fight your way down to, like, infiltrate your enemy's base and take them down.
Okay.
In between the 3 main lanes, you have the jungle, which is this, like, more maze-like area of pathways that you can use to get between the 3 lanes.
Okay.
Inside the jungle, there are, like, other NPC enemies and stuff that you can go out and try to fight and kill, and if you're able to do it successfully, you'll give a buff to your entire team. So, in team construction for MOBAs, you'll usually have 4 people who are, like, balancing either defending or trying to make pushes on each of the 3 lanes. And then a 5th player will occasionally, instead of focusing on the lanes, go off and focus on fighting in the jungle to get experience and, like, other buffs for their teammates. And I think that's a role in which a mage can excel. Somebody who's going to go off on their own and accomplish weird, obscure side shit that will benefit the team.
Okay.
But that doesn't lead to them directly contributing to getting the game finished in a consistent way.
That makes sense.
Because of how Spurb is structured.
Yeah.
I also think that, like, I have a whole thematic thing off to the side of why I think mages are cosmically doomed to never be listened to, right? But if I put that aside, I still think mages can't, like, the idea of an active knowledge class is kind of fundamentally at odds in a way that makes mages' lives difficult.
Solix just really got the worst of everything.
Yeah, he sure did. And I put these 2 here independent of each other, right? Like, I didn't look at Solix and be like, both of these things suck.
Man, I hate this guy. Suck.
I think that if you take Mituna into account, it's a pretty clear case of how the wrong class can really just fuck a Doom player over.
Yeah.
And I think that if you take Mulin into account, it's a pretty clear idea of how a mage who isn't, like, locked in on a goal can just kind of flounder and do nothing.
Yeah. That is one of the hard things about it, is about, like, analyzing these classes, is some of them we have a lot of material of them doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
And in others, obviously the ones that are on the kid side get the most of it. But with others, it is harder. At least Solix is around the entire comic off and on, and isn't, like, killed off early on and we never see anything. But so we can get more examples there. But I don't know. I just feel like I have some different mage thoughts that I'm gonna have to think about, because
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm open to having this one argued with me more than any other, I think. Yeah. I mean, first of all, hold on. Let me restart that sentence. Hi, you, listener. Hello. Come argue with me about all of these.
Where are you?
I mean, if you come and join the Jaxiax Discord server...
There we go.
You can @ me, and I will happily come and debate you about all of these in a very friendly way, by the way. I'm not gonna, like, get aggressive at you.
I was about to say, like, come join my server for some PvP.
Yeah. I want to talk about this, though. I think that this is a way of looking at Spurb that we do not actually engage with often, and I think it's really interesting. I also have very particular thoughts about mages that I recognize are not reflected by everybody, and so I'm very willing, in particular with this one, to have my position argued, and I would love to be wrong, because again, I love mages. I think it's a fascinating class.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because a while ago, people on my server and some other people might know, I was starting to put together my own classpect explainer doc, but I got nuked. My Tumblr got nuked 2 times in 2 months, and it kind of, like, killed a lot of my motivation for a lot of things. This is one of the projects I was working on during that I just, like, stopped being as interested in for a while, and it's something I want to go back to.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was talking about mage versus seer, I was kind of talking the seer as the mathematician and the mage as the engineer. So, like yeah, it's more going to be used for themselves, but in the way that an engineer might rip apart a clock and be able to put it back together, or might build something that I don't know. I feel like it can be used for other things in the same way a tank can have their uses. And I'm stuck on the engineer thing as far as like building stuff.
Totally.
But I think that the mage is application rather than theory.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Which I'm not necessarily trying to argue out of D tier. This is your ranking.
Yeah,
It's just yeah.
I think to sort of build on that, and maybe this will illuminate why I have my mage opinions. Sorry, I didn't mean for this to turn into mage discourse, but here we are, and I'm all in on it, right?
This is what it is. I just didn't have as strong opinions to argue with you against all the other ones.
Fair enough. So my perspective on mage broadly as like a thematic thing, right, is that when you're doing your classes, you gotta sort of think about what storytelling archetypes they're trying to embody.
Okay, that makes sense.
I think that if you're thinking about, like, prophets as a broad literary category...
Sorry, for a second I had prophets with an F and not a PH, and I'm like, It took me a second.
You've got two kinds. You've got your Oracle of Delphi, right, who is gonna tell you the future and give you your prophecies, and you're gonna, like, they're gonna come true no matter what.
Yeah.
Even if you, like, try to fight against them or whatever... But the Oracle exists to give you a heads up so that you can prepare for it. And that's what a seer is.
I disagree with that too. I mean, we've seen seers say things like, I guess like you can argue that like in whatever timeline those things definitely came true. But I mean, that's just the nature of Esper is there's timelines where everything came true. So that doesn't make as much sense for a seer. Because I'm thinking about with Terezi, how she, can see the different outcomes based on, like, people's most likely choices, and she can, see that, and then she's limited by her own, I don't want to say imagination there, we can get into the whole, like, how she fixed the retcon.
Yeah.
And then there's Rose, who sees the most fortuitous outcome, and how to get to the most fortuitous outcome. But the seers we see do things aren't talking about, I guess, like, if we are including the Signless, how he saw things that did definitely happen in the past, actually. I had to rearrange that in my head because we find out about before is after. But I just, and I don't want to interrupt you before you get to your spiel about, like, prophecies and mages. It's just, or prophets and mages. It's just, I don't understand how a seer could be saying things that will definitely happen.
I guess that's fair, and maybe I'm like, again, I'm talking like about literary stuff here.
Yeah.
In ways that don't 100% cleanly map onto what we get in Homestuck, because Homestuck is a messier story that's not always telling mythological stories.
Because Homestuck is in conversation with the concept of a story.
Exactly.
And falls in line and disagrees with it as it will to make a point. Finish the mage spiel and then I'll come in and disagree with you some more.
Yeah. I do want to say that my counterpoint to all of that is that, like, while Rose and Terezi are, like, more complicated than that, I think it's because Rose and Terezi are more complicated characters than the Oracle of Delphi, right? I think that to maybe more cleanly map that, I am talking about the Signless. The Oracle of Delphi is a class of character much more similar to the Signless, and while the Signless doesn't explicitly talk about the future, the Signless has visions, and shares those visions with people, and rallies people around him.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about when I bring up the Oracle of Delphi, is like, here are a person who can share visions and who can change the way that people around them act as a result of their visions, right?
That makes sense. I think how you phrased it with this thing is definitely going to happen is what, like, got me the most. And it's also funny how, I don't want to get into my ancestor discourse yet again, but the Signless is the only one whose retconned class actually makes sense.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I don't think the reasoning for what he was saying, like, ever came about until the Dancestors came about. but like retroactively, that is like the only one that actually makes sense as a retcon class.
You're so
like
right.
a real literary retcon, not a Homestuck retcon. Just a hussy changed his mind to better fit the story.
Yeah, totally.
The other prophet.
I was gonna get to mages.
Yes.
There's another kind of prophet,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the doomed prophet.
Yes.
The sort of person who has knowledge of some incoming event or disaster and cannot convince people to listen to them. In particular, I think of, like, Noah from, like, Noah and the Ark.
Not the obvious Cassandra?
I mean, sure, yeah. Why not? But, like, he's got this foreknowledge of this great incoming, impending flood that, like, he knows how to survive and knows how to make it through it. He's got the intimate knowledge, and this is gonna, like, also come into your engineer thing of, like, how to build the boat that's gonna get him and his family out of there, right? But fucking everybody thinks he's insane. Nobody's gonna listen to him about what's gonna happen.
Is that the spiel?
That's the spiel.
I disagree that mages are prophets. I think that's strictly a seer thing, and we can argue about, like, which type of seer might be dependent on the aspect or, just the seer in general. I just don't think mages are prophets.
That's fair enough.
And so it's just like, and that just kind of, and I just wanted to let you say your thing before I said it was all dumb, I guess.
Oh, no, fair, yeah.
So I guess I just disagree with the framing, but if we just have two very different framings for it, I get where you're coming from with it.
Okay, yeah. In that case,
I just disagree.
In that case, before we move on, because I do want to tie this up and move along here soon, but I do want to know, where would you put mage then?
I think that a mage would be more like a B, I think is where I would put a mage.
Fascinating.
I think they are a good foundation. To me, it's like whenever you are, I can only think of the example of whenever you are setting up, like when people talk about anarchist compounds and stuff, they're like, okay, who's going to build your sidewalk and make sure it's up to code? Who's gonna, like, do a lot of the foundational, like, I don't want to just say maintenance and safety checks and stuff like that, but I think that mages would be, I guess, kind of foundational to build upon. God, I'm trying to think of it in RPG terms. RPGs are all dating simulators for me. What is tactics?
So valid.
Yeah. I just think that they would be, like, obviously they're not like super support. I do think that if we want to have the spectrum from Prince to Bard on active to passive, I think, they're not in the exact middle, but I think they're closer to the middle as far as mage and seer go.
Yeah, they are. Mage, that whole mage seer air, which I guess if you're using the like OD ranking, they're all in the middle.
No, air and mage. Absolutely disagree about which being paired with air. That makes no sense.
Fair enough. I just wanted a general letter ranking. You don't got to go into all your thoughts if you're not ready to.
No, that's fair. Do you kind of get what I mean though? Like, again, I'm having a hard time translating this to like a game mechanic necessarily, but I'm just thinking about like a team building.
I think
I might argue myself down to C just because maybe winning the game isn't necessary, but I think that they would provide a good foundation in the absence of, let's say, a knight or some other, like, if you don't have a lot of A tiers or something. I might end up arguing myself down to a C, but I'm going to stick with B right now and not sit here second guessing myself forever.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
Okay.
All right.
We can move on.
We can move on to maid now. I think maids are A tier.
Jane stays winning.
I think maid in combination... Now, I'm going to grant that I think that every maid that we see is with a pretty decent aspect, right? Except maybe Porum. But, like, I think maids generally are really good at getting shit done, right? And I've said already that I think that's what you need out of a good active class.
Is maid the active to air? Or the active to... What is maid the active in the wrong version?
Sylph.
Sylph.
I guess if you're gonna pair maid with air, you could argue about which is active and which is passive, if you wanted to. I am also, I will say, a huge fan of people getting wibblier and, like, examining new options for, like, the active-passive class pairings. I Love that that discussion is happening. I'm aware that it has been happening for a while. And again, please come talk about this shit with me. Because I'd love to hear new and different opinions.
Yeah.
And, like, the only reason I'm operating off of the system that I am is because it's a default that I've used for a long time, and I haven't sat down and, like, really concretely decided this is what I think is true now, right?
For sure.
Where were we? Maid. Yeah, I don't know. Maids get shit done. They're good general combatants, and every maid that we've seen in comic has had a moment where they get to do, like, just really big, crazy shit with their aspect, right? Like, maid is a class that really intensifies your aspect and allows you to, I think, explore some of the craziest heights that your aspect can achieve within, like, the real physical world.
Interesting. Like, I'm not disagreeing. It's just because, I mean, Aradia and Jane do big shit.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess, I hadn't sat down and thought about that too much, but yeah, it's, yeah.
Moving along to Paige. I think Paige goes in C tier. And I think it goes down here for a lot of the reasons that Hope goes in B tier, except that Paige doesn't have the guarantees of, like, potential reality warping power that Hope brings with it as an aspect.
Yeah.
Paige on its own in the abstract without any specific aspect in mind just doesn't have... It has a guarantee of an eventual endpoint, but without the aspect that it's going to in mind, it's really hard to give a concrete idea of whether or not I think Paige is, like, good on its own. So I think it goes in C tier because it has to fundamentally put up with the early game shit, but, like, this comes with the caveat that, like, specific pages of specific aspects are gonna be up in S or A tier.
Yeah, and then that's so much up to the player, because the only page we see do cool shit is because a sylph healed his mind in whatever weird way that means.
Yeah.
To, like, had to use another player to specifically unlock it in a way that, like, was not only game breaking but was character breaking, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Which, that's another thing that might be worth discussing. Fucking classpect combinations are really powerful and allow you to achieve heights that you can't achieve on an individual level. Like Aranea and Jake, and, like, Terezi and John doing retcon shit.
Mm-hmm.
You can combine your title powers in ways that are just unthinkable. They accomplish such ridiculous feats of power when put together that it really kind of doesn't matter what your tier on this list is, you know?
Get ready for our 24-hour video where we pair class specs and rank those.
Fuck. Can I be honest?
Yeah.
That sounds fucking fun.
I know, I knew it would.
We'd have to break it up like we did with the ship tier list, but I'd be so down.
New series unlocked.
Look, I will talk about class specs forever.
Yeah. I was considering doing a class spec series before, the nuke nuked my motivation.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll consider it.
Prince. Prince is B tier.
Every time, like, you hesitate a little bit, like, whenever you hesitated before talking, and I'm not saying that you necessarily hesitated here, but there was, like, a little pause before mentioning Heart, and then there was just, like, a little pause before Prince. I'm like, oh no, Tommy's about to wreck my shit. I mean, I'm not a Prince anymore, but I was for a while.
Yeah, Prince is on the border of B and A tier, is the thing. Like Mind is, but I think Prince ends up getting to be a little lower.
Prince and Mind gets to be solidly A.
Yes, agreed. I think Prince and Maid have a lot of similarities in that when they're operating at full capacity, they both have a very, like, get shit done sort of attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the reason Prince gets to come down to B is that Princes can be a little bit more and I promise I'm not just saying this because of Dirk, Aridin does it too, princes can be a bit more self-destructive about it.
Yeah.
Maids tend to be, like, they tend to be either calm and collected or very, like, righteous rage about it, which can go bad in its own way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think princes are more likely to burn themselves out, and as a consequence, I think they get to go a little lower.
Cool.
Rogue. Rogue gets to go in solidly... I think Rogue is... Yeah, Rogue's B tier. It's a good and decent support class. It can accomplish quite a lot in the same way that, like, heirs and princes can accomplish quite a lot. And I don't think it has any explicit negatives, right? Like, if order mattered on this tier list, I would put Rogue right below Prince, near the top of B tier. But I think Rogue doesn't achieve any of the heights that Prince and Heir can. I think it's just, like, fundamentally solid overall. Which, I mean, I think does make it a good class. If you're like, we want this aspect on our team, but we don't have a solid idea of, like, all the good classes are taken and we don't have a solid idea of, like, a cool combination for it, I think Rogue is gonna be a good one to just be like, yeah, here's a random class of blood, right?
Yeah.
Seer. Seer is A tier. I've been discussing over the course of this how, like, a really good thing to have on your team is somebody who can direct your team, right?
The Fire Emblem Tactician.
Yeah. And there is, fundamentally, at the end of the day, you don't need multiple of these. And having multiple of them might be bad unless they're really good friends and you know they work well together.
Yeah.
So, like, the whole, like, mind, blood, seer, maybe light kind of space, you really only fundamentally need a single player that interacts in this area, and you only need one of these aspects or classes, strictly speaking. But this is a fundamental kind of player, and Seer is, as a single class, a way to accomplish that goal without having to worry about how it's going to interact with its aspect. Whereas if you're going to go light or mind or blood, you have to kind of think about, is this class going to interfere with the job that I might be expecting this aspect to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Light and mind get to go in A tier because they have other alternative things that they can be doing, whereas blood maybe doesn't. But Seer is going to do this no matter what.
Yeah.
And I'm maybe talking myself into putting it in S tier as a result.
Yeah?
I think I am. Because while Seer does not have the unique capability to do this... Actually, no, it does. Within the classes, Seer has the unique capability to do this. Other classes have to do a specific aspect in order to unlock the capability to be this type of support player. But Seer gets to do it all the time with no investment whatsoever. And it doesn't run the risks of potentially fucking up that job by having the wrong aspect. I think it's important to consider your Seer's aspect when you're doing the rest of your team composition to make sure that you can take the best advantage of your Seer's particular tactical capabilities. But I think among the classes, this is a unique utility that Seer has that nobody else can accomplish.
I'm happy with that because I switched my class to Seer.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Sylph.
This confused me it took me so long to figure out what this was until I narrowed it down. Is this, I guess I just don't remember what Arania looked like in her Sylph gear.
Fair enough.
I'm like, it pajama, I mean, I know they're all kind of pajamas, but just like real clothes, you got a blanket and everything.
Yeah, it's so true. How do I feel about this?
The one real example, I mean, I know that Kanai is a Sylph too, but the one real example we get of like a Sylph doing shit is Arania, and she does she does some shit.
I think that Kanaya is more... When we were talking about Kanaya with Space, I was pretty negative on Kanaya's contributions to her aspect, right? But I also think that's because, in a weird way, Kanaya is way more of a Sylph than she is like a Space player. I think that if you're looking at the good things that Kanaya does for her team, She tells you a lot more about how sylphs are good than she tells you about how space is good.
Bad classpect combo?
I think it probably is. And I think it's more that sylph is good overall. So I think I'm gonna put sylph in A. I think sylph and maid are very similar, but they come at the situation differently, right? A sylph is a healer, and it's described as that many times in the comic. And they're a really good support class, but the thing about sylph is that they're a support class who is willing to... It's not just that sylph casts healing spells all the time, it's that a sylph is willing to step up and fix the fucking root of the problem.
Yeah, I think of sylph as the meddler class.
Yeah. Kanaya is willing to cut Gamzee like a tumor out of her session when he goes wrong.
Yeah.
And that's why sylph is A tier. It would be a lot lower if it was just a generic healer. Thief. I'm gonna be really positive on Thief in the other video.
Yeah, no way.
I think Thief is B tier. I think Thief has the potential for a lot of really high highs, but I think just like Bard, it also has the potential of just really fucking everything up.
Yeah.
I think Thieves... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we have Mina and Vriska kind of as an example of both.
Yeah. I think Thieves are a little more steerable than Bards, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But, you just don't want a loose cannon like that on your team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that despite the fact that Thief is great as an active class, right, it does all of the things that you want a good active class to be able to do. It's just, you can't... It also has all of the weaknesses of a solid active class.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it highlights the weaknesses of a good active class. Maybe more intensely than any other active class does.
That makes sense.
On the subject of the whole active-passive thing, I do want to revisit Sylph real quick to add in another reason that I think Sylph is good, which is that I think on a team of all or primarily passive players, Sylph can most easily step up to fill the role of an absent active player, because it can identify problems and solve them.
That makes sense, yeah.
Okay, last we have Witch.
Yes.
I think Witch is going to be the only other S tier class, aside from Seer, not counting the master classes.
Yeah.
Witch is active enough that it can do all of the things that an active player can do, but it's passive enough not to receive the negatives of an active player, like the really impulsive negatives that active players have to deal with, like maids and princes and thieves in particular. A witch can go wrong, but it's a lot harder for it to happen. And they have such intense power scaling on their aspect that it's worth the relatively low risk that a witch is just gonna go wrong and fuck your entire game over. Like, if your witch goes the way of Damara, you're fucked.
Yeah.
But if your witch goes the way of Damara, you're so fucking stupid. How did you let that happen? Right?
Stares at Mina.
I think you can pair a witch with any fucking aspect and it's gonna put in fucking work.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's not just Jade talking. That is the fact that Damara fucked her game up as thoroughly as she did. And it is the fact that Feferi, despite doing relatively little, still can do the plot contrivance nonsense of, like, reviving some people when she needs to.
And also, like, got the outer... What are they called? The outer gods or whatever to make the dream bubbles.
Right. Yeah. No, that's an immensely impressive feat that, like, I would not have been possible, I think, were she not a witch.
Yeah. Do we want to do a jokey last one that I'm not going to go get an asset for and waste?
Oh, that's S tier, easy. I don't feel I have to explain myself on this.
Okay. For those confused, waste is something. Did Hussey come up with waste as a 13th class?
Yeah. Andrew Hussey, the author, within the comic, his canonical class is a waste of space.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was like a fandom thing that he adopted or if it was a thing that they came up with.
I think that it's never referred to explicitly in comic, but he gets a unique god tier outfit during one of the author interludes, and it was on the form spring or something where they were like, hey, what's your title? And he was like, I'm a waste of space.
Yeah, just to explain those for those not in the know,
Yeah.
since, again, not explicitly said in the comic. And anything not explicitly said in the comic is potentially not canon, and things explicitly in the comic are like whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. My actual thoughts on Waste, by the way, because I think it's fun.
Yeah.
I view Waste as the author class TM, right? Like,
Yeah.
anybody who is writing a story is occupying the role of a waste of an aspect.
Yeah.
When I was doing Homestuck tabletop RPG stuff, my conception of the cosmology of how that worked was that each of the players was behaving as a waste of the aspect of their player character.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I need to explain why having authorial control over the story in Homestuck is powerful.
But not infinitely powerful.
It's true. Lord English is defeated, and Lord English kills Hussey easily.
Yeah. That's interesting. I legitimately had no thoughts about Waste of Space. I just like that it as a comic. It's a funny addition, and I didn't think of it beyond that as an authorial role. I mean, obviously the author gave it to themselves, but
It's a funny meme that I have thought too much about because I've thought too much about Homestuck's cosmology.
I mean, are you really a Homestuck fan if there's not a funny Homestuck meme you haven't thought too much about?
It's true.
Okay, to wrap it all up as a summary for those listening and not watching, though I will be saving this to my tier maker page, and there will be a link in the description. For S, we have Breath, Rage, Time, Lord, Muse, Seer, Witch. Sorry, now I'm having to remember what these are again.
Yep.
For A, we have Life, Light, Mind, Night, Maid, Sylph. B tier, we have Blood, Hope, Space, Air, Prince, Rogue, Thief. C tier, we have Heart, Void, I almost said Space. Heart, Void, Bard, Page, and then in D tier, we have Solix, Doom, and Mage.
Sorry, guy.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, in my defense, though, his title was literally detrimental to himself for his entire existence.
Yeah, he did not have a good time until he just fucked off from the story.
Yeah. Being a Mage of Doom is literally nothing but suffering, canonically.
Yeah, it's true. And your Doomed Prophet thing, I know other people have theorized about Mage being a cursed class. So, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't love I think mages can be useful.
Yeah.
I think it can happen. But I think they're very sensitive to their aspect combination, and I also think that it takes a lot more work for a mage to become functional than it does for other classes.
That makes sense.
Again, I don't think there is any bad option.
Yeah.
I think all of them are workable. It's just, if you're picking mage from a gameplay perspective, it's because you have some unique thing you're trying to do with it, or because you're, trying to do a challenge run.
Bonus round. Do you think there is an optimal number of players for a Spurb session? If so, how many players?
That's a great question. I think the optimal number of players is, 8, because it maximizes the amount of things that you're able to do, but still leaves space for you to intentionally exclude things that are going to be actively detrimental to your gameplay.
Yeah. Are you taking into account that the more players you have, the more powerful the end boss gets?
That's a really fair point, and I hadn't thought about it super in-depth. I think maybe 6 is probably better in that case. If you're being really, really careful about your, class choices, right? If you're optimizing, I think you want to go for as few as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if you're not optimizing, if you're just loading Spurb up for the first time, and you're going to take the game slow, or you're intending to, you probably do want more players, because having access to more aspects allows you more opportunities to fuck around and find more combinations of two players that will allow you to break the game.
Okay, yeah.
It's worth it to take the risk of a more powerful boss, because you'll have more overall levels across you all, and you'll have more opportunities to do really fucked up shit.
Get yourself a Pokemon party of classpects. Okay, I think we're like done. I think that's it.
That's it.
This is all. I'm really excited about the next thing we record. I hope it was exciting enough for you all. In the previous times, I guess there's a chance that people are listening to this first. In which case, I'm very excited about the other stuff, and you should go listen to it absolutely right next. Domi, you got any? You got pluggables that you want to say out loud?
Here's my plugs. I currently work editing podcasts for the Bard Rock network of shows. You can go find them at bardrockcafe.com. We got a whole bunch of shows over there. Primarily, we do actual play shows, D&D, Critical Role's a poor example. The Adventure Zone style podcasts of getting on, playing D&D or other tabletop RPGs, and having a good time. The show that I currently work on over there is called Blades in Paradise. It is a Blades in the Dark actual play podcast set in a steampunk dystopian future. We've just hit episode 19 as of recording. I think it is where the actual play effect has finally taken place and the show is really hitting its stride. Emotions are at an all-time high. I highly recommend it.
I've been on some stuff over there too, and I'm gonna be on some stuff in like however many months. I recorded it, and it's just you gotta wait. They record ahead of time for
sure.
At least their main stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of shows that there's not a lot of shows I was on, but I have been on stuff. Not to plug me in your plug.
Nah, no, you're perfectly fine. While we're doing Bard Rock Cafe plugs, I'm also gonna go ahead and plug. I'm gonna go ahead and plug College of Whispers, which I think is a really great show. They are an actual play book club podcast where they go through and they listen to actual plays from outside of the network, both big and small, and, discuss what about them that they liked. I have a couple of other shows that are on the network that are not out yet, but that I'm participating in. Very excited about all of them, so keep an eye on the space sometime in, say, September or so.
Yeah, the network is constantly growing, like, not like so fast that it's maybe a bad sign, but just like they're very considerate about looking for new shows to add and how they can implement that into what they got going on. Because it just started with Bard Rock Cafe, which is their flagship show, and they just started, getting other actual plays and such.
Yeah. Nah, it's phenomenal. I love Bard Rock. It's a phenomenal network full of incredibly passionate creatives. Genuinely a place that I couldn't be happier to be working. Outside of that, I also I've just started editing for a show called Resonant Beats. It is an interstitial podcast, another actual play based in the world of Kingdom Hearts, a show that I've just gotten started on, but that I'm having a good time with. They are on hiatus currently, but, in a few months, maybe, should hopefully be coming out of it.
Cool, and then I have links to Domi's SoundCloud and Ko-Fi in the description. Absolutely. They are always there, whether or not she actually edited the episode. Well, she did all the music for this show and for Fake Gamer Bro, which is my mobile game podcast, if you don't know about it. So it makes sense to always have it in there, but I would anyway.
If you want to get a hold of me, either just to chat or for business requests, the ideal way to do that is probably to come find me in Jax's podcast server.
Yeah, which is also linked in the description. This is a positive for me. It is not huge, and it is active enough that you can say stuff without feeling like you are intruding on a clique of people. I say that as obviously part of the clique because it's my server. But I know I have that issue in like other servers where it's like, I don't know, man. But more people to be more active, and I post stuff in there that I don't post on any social media or even some of my other servers. I don't share stuff in. There is some stuff for my fic, Bondless Prince, Bloodless Knight, that was previously patron only, but I just didn't translate that over to Ko-fi, and I have a dedicated fan of that fic in the server, so I just drop them little treats in between updates. Yeah, come join the server and hang out and chat. And I work on a lot of stuff. Like Live Laugh Stuck is probably my biggest, most paid attention to project, despite being about the most niche subject. But I also make games, and I have a podcast about mobile games called Fake Gamer Bro, and I just do other shit. I can't stop doing other shit, you know?
Yeah, no, I get it.
I have my end roll credits where I do the whole spiel, but also like signing up for my Ko-fi would be like super cool. I am currently doing a bit better than breaking even on hosting costs, but I still pay Domi to edit, and that's just hosting the podcast. That's not the websites, and that's not just like, I don't know, I would like to be 100% break even on this, and additionally I would like to do more than that, but I'm trying to just have the small goal of that. Right now, there aren't a whole lot of bonuses. I'll be honest. I do have some bonus episodes backed up. If I decide to cut something from an episode, or Domi suggests to cut something from an episode because it was just a tangent that wasn't necessary, that will go to supporters from Ko-fi. You'll get your own podcast link for that. My current supporters are chill with not getting a whole lot of bonus stuff, not getting early access, because they like to be able to talk about it at the same time everyone else gets it. And really, I think in this climate, this is going to sound really obnoxious and a shill for me personally, but I don't want you to think about this as just for me personally, but like in general, even if you decide not to support me, I think we really need to start thinking about supporting creators and people you like to see, like even if their creations are just posts on Blue Sky or Tumblr that you really like. If you are able to support them in any way, especially in this current political climate, I can only speak from the American perspective, but it's not like it's super great around the world. And not only doing it for commissions, or not only doing it for bonus content, or not only doing it for anything else, I cannot tell you how appreciative I am of my supporters who want to see me do what I do, even if I can't offer them special benefits, because I just don't have a lot of time, and I have a lot of things I want to do, or I just haven't had any good ideas, and they want to be able to discuss the same things that everyone else can discuss. And this isn't to like shit on people who do have bonus content like locked behind paywalls. I still have bonus content locked behind paywalls. Eventually, I will make more that's locked behind the paywall, but I'm getting really out of hand with this. It's just I appreciate the people who support me so much, both financially and just Domi coming into on my podcast and helping me edit and providing me with this music, and Justin, who is my yes man for, I'm like, hey, I need someone on this last minute. Can you come on? And he will, and he always has something interesting to add. And everyone else who was guested, and just everything. And this has gotten real mushy, and I really just wanted to say, like, hey, like, support people. Actually, before I just wanted to say support my Ko-fi, and then it just turned into this. But that's how it goes. Things are just rough out there. And if you don't have money, do not give people money. If you are living paycheck to paycheck and you can barely afford to give yourself a little treat like once a month, if like purchasing a $5 game is something you have to budget around, don't do, like, I don't need your money. Like, for real. Making sure you are staying afloat is more important than giving me $1, right? Or anyone else for that matter. I think that is super important. Mutual aid is not,
for sure. Yeah.
Money is not the beginning and end of mutual aid. There's so much more than that. Money is great. It is not everything. And I know I'm speaking to a Homestuck audience that is primarily queer, and queer people are primarily not people with money. So I don't know. I didn't mean to get on this tangent, but here we are, and this is the end of the podcast, and I will see you Chronologically, next time I see you should be for Moosestuck. Because we're back. The Gigapause will be unpaused.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. And we'll
I
see
can't
you then.
wait
Bye-bye.
for the Gigapause to be over. I'm so tired.
Bye! Thank you to Domi for composing the theme song and editing the episode. You can find more of her work at soundcloud.com/dominothief. Shout out to our fakest fan tier supporters, Danny the Spoonlord and Tezrak. You can become a supporter and receive early episodes and bonus content for as little as $1 a month over at ko-fi.com/jaxyaks, or simply give a one-time tip. For information on and links to my other projects, head over to jaxyaks.com. Thanks again for listening.